Hi everybody, my name is Michael. Today I'm going to be going through my art school admissions process and kind of how I broke down some of the ideas I had flowing in my head for my portfolio, my National Portfolio Day experience, and kind of why I chose art school.
Hi, disclaimer. So basically everything I say in this video is my opinion. I'm not an admissions officer and I don't want you guys to think that everything I said in this video is factual, so take it with a grain of salt.
To give you a quick background on kind of who I am, I basically have been painting since 5th grade. I didn't have a lot of high school art experience like as a class. I did a lot of set design for the school musicals every year, and then we have a really big prom installation that happens every year. So those are kind of the things I was doing in school, but I was mostly taught in a class outside of my high school up until about my freshman year, and then the past few years I've been mostly self-taught, and those classes were actually only for oil painting and drawing, so I didn't get a lot of sculptural experience until I went to set design in my prom. So some of you may be wondering why I chose art school over a university, and that's kind of complicated. I actually applied to 2 universities, Kent State University in Ohio and Edinburgh University in my own state of Pennsylvania. But I also applied to 3 art schools. Those art schools were PRATT, Parsons, and Rhode Island School of Design. I was going to apply to Cleveland Institute of Art, but I decided not to in the end because they have rolling admissions, so if I wasn't accepted to those 3 art schools, I would still apply, but I did get accepted to all 3, and I actually got accepted to both my universities. All of those were on scholarship, but I will get more into the information on scholarships towards the end of the video following my portfolio and explain more about how my acceptances went. So basically, when I was a sophomore and junior, I really enjoyed these videos. I watched a ton of them to kind of put my portfolio together, get some ideas. So that's why I'm making mine today. I do come from a small town, so I do have some unique perspectives and giving you guys the opportunity to see that if you're also from a small area and you don't have a lot of high school art experience, that you can still go to these schools. When I was kind of figuring out what schools I wanted to go to, I picked Rhode Island, Pratt, and Parsons because they're ranking nationally. Rhode Island is #1 for art and design, I believe, and Parsons is 2nd. Pratt falls in the top 10, I think, or top 5. So those were the schools that I thought would give me the best education. And then Kent State and Edinburgh were 2 really good art schools that were close to me and affordable. So I went to National Portfolio Day in Cleveland on November 17th. If any of you were there, that's awesome. But I took a portfolio like this. A lot of kids took digital formats. A lot of kids took larger works. I tried to put all of my work kind of into something super accessible, easy, quick to flip through, so that I could get more of my time slot to be a conversation and not as much filing through my work, because RISD was timed to about 5 minutes per portfolio review, and then Pratt and Parsons started timing towards the end of the day. Parsons didn't have a lot of people coming and Pratt did, so I'm not really sure how those things fell. I had a really long Parsons review. My Parsons review lasted probably about 22 minutes, maybe a little less than that, and I had the sweetest lady, and it's actually part of the reason I ended up applying to Parsons, because she gave me a lot of background on kind of the sustainability and things like that at Parsons. So if you're interested in that, Parsons has an incredible program, and I'm really excited I got in, even though I will unfortunately not be attending. So I will kind of brief this portfolio. I'm not going to explain each piece because the important works come later, and you'll see them in my regular portfolio, because I didn't change a lot from my National Portfolio Day portfolio from November to the portfolio I submitted in January. So I'm just going to do a quick flip through for you guys. This is my recommendation letter over here. This is a double spread. Here's my assistant of this one. Some figure drawings. And I did include, if you can tell, a lot of photos of work versus physical works because they were too large, but like this is a physical piece. I tried to when I could. This is a physical piece. But that wasn't something I was too concerned about because they're not really looking for that. They're going to see your portfolio in a digital format, so it doesn't really matter. I also included some sketchbook stuff I had that worked with this piece. And like I said, you're going to see a lot of these pieces repeated in my actual portfolio, so I'm not going to go into super good detail about them. But as I'm kind of briefing through my portfolio, I will try to give like some explanation of what changed and how I formatted them differently. I put some detail shots over here. And then I ended with a self-portrait. So my National Portfolio Day experience was actually relatively exciting. It was my 18th birthday. I had never been to Cleveland in that kind of a scenario. So I met a lot of really awesome people, a lot of great friends. I highly recommend you go to National Portfolio Day. I got a slew of advice that actually is part of the reason I think I got accepted into the schools and got so much scholarship, was because I really listened and catered each portfolio to the school based on what the admissions officer had told me. They all basically said I was in the right direction with that portfolio, but they gave me some really good advice on on making sure that I was connecting my creative work and my technical work, so my still lifes and then my sculptures, making sure that they could see a good connection between them. They wanted to make sure that the experimentation in my portfolio made sense and that they were still seeing technical and creative ideas in the middle, not just fully creative and fully observational works, if that makes sense. So yeah, if you get the opportunity to go, it's free. My lines were not super big in Cleveland, so yeah, like I said, highly recommend going. I got a lot of great advice, and I'll explain more of that as I get into my actual portfolio. I actually submitted a resume alongside my portfolio, and I actually had to email each of the schools individually to get an email to send that in. None of them would allow me to include that on my common application, but I felt as though common application's 10 electives didn't format well for me. I have a lot of extracurriculars that are minor but important, and I wanted to make sure that I could show them how I formatted that onto a sheet. I'll kind of pop it up here. I'm going to try to either cover up my address or delete it completely from the document if you want to pause and like kind of gander over some of the stuff I had on it, but basically just my average, like this is what I did, these are the things I did, that was more concise than Common App. My SAT score was a 1230, it was a 620 on the math and a 610 on the English. I did not retake it, I only took it once. That score is about average for the Rhode schools, so RISD and Parsons and Pratt, but they really do like to see that you're academically strong. All of those schools, especially Rhode Island, make sure that you're showing that. My GPA actually, when I applied to RISD, was a 4.12. When I applied to Pratt and Parsons, it was a 4.08, and that is also an above average GPA. So if you have that, submit your scores, make sure that they see your GPA. So now I'd like to get into my portfolio. I did submit 3 different portfolios. Parsons only wanted, I think it was 8 to 12 pieces or 8 to 10 pieces, and that one had the Parsons challenge attached to it as well. And then I had my Pratt and RISD portfolio were basically identical, but the difference was my RISD challenge was formatted differently. For my Parsons challenge and my RISD challenge, I actually used the same structure, and I will go through my RISD portfolio now because my RISD portfolio has every single piece that was either used in the Parsons application or for the Pratt application, and it has the RISD challenge, if that makes sense. So basically on Slide Room, you have the work, your title, the medium that you used, the size, and additional details. Some schools formatted this section a little differently. I think for Parsons, I wasn't allowed to put size, so I included all of this information in the description, but this is how RISD formatted it. So now I'm going to place any of the works here that I'm speaking on, kind of read the description as I go. So this first piece that I included was called A Walk in December. It's oil on hand stretched canvas, and it's 24 by 24 inches. My additional details section, which I highly recommend you guys spend a lot of time thinking about how you want to write these. I made sure that all of mine kind of flowed into a story. How do you feel when you walk downtown just after it snows? Most people would say calm or happy, but for me, I feel quite the opposite. I hand stretched a square canvas, toned it with acrylic, and painted this in oil. My goal was to capture the juxtaposition between the colored snowy scene and the figure seemingly stuck in the middle of the composition to represent my emotions of seasonal depression, casting a shadow upon the leafless tree. I worked from a series of photos, including townhouses, abstract paintings, and color studies to compose this image. My second piece is titled Ego. The medium is acrylic and textured medium. It was basically like this paste that was a little bit thicker than gesso, but it kind of allowed me to sculpt these like sharp, pointy shapes into it, and it's hard to see in the photo. And it's on wood board. The size is 24 by 32 inches. So my additional detail section goes as this. Following a series of studies of the human figure and abstraction, I finally felt prepared to tackle this piece. It was inspired by my brother's critical health condition at the time, and I did it without a reference for the pose. The genderless figure is positioned in a way as though they are falling back into the composition to represent losing themselves while plummeting into darkness. The butterflies are brightly opposite to represent unavoidable change. Life cycle of the butterfly was also symbolic here. TV static was used to represent numbness and emptiness, and I started with thick globs of sculpting texture medium and painted it in several layers of acrylic. The title is a representation of human consciousness that is left when its personality is lost, and all it has is a sense of itself. Okay, my third piece is titled A Shady Path in California. This is oil pastels and marker on a wood board canvas, and it's 12 by 12 inches. And this was during the trip to visit my brother in California while he recovered. I snapped a series of photos on a hike, and I returned home and wanted to experiment not only a new medium, but also in a more intense color profile. I sketched my composition in a deep purple marker and then layered harder and then softer oil pastels. This piece was symbolic of my own growth mentally during the time, shadows broken by the sunlight, but mainly was a study of the landscape's intriguing color and vegetation. This is a series of photos that I will show here. There's 2 works here.
Hi, basically I ramble on for a while here, but all I wanted to say was that I got rid of the third piece compared to my National Portfolio Day portfolio because it was too close to the photo reference and I didn't think it fit in the portfolio.
These are titled Together Works of Insomnia. They actually hung in a frame together, so if I can find that photo, I don't know if I can, but regardless, they're going to both be here. And it's India ink on Yupo paper. They're 5 by 8 inches approximately for both. They're a little bit of a different size. This was an experiment in abstracting a composition and the human figure to represent the oppressive nature of insomnia. These strong impeding lines are representative of the anxiety that gives the insomniac the inability to fall asleep. Also, my goal was to play into the nature of a plastic paper as to mimic harsh shadows on human forms. These are done from sketches in my sketchbook that were done from photo references, so I pulled a lot of different angles from different photos and kind of included them, these impeding lines. It was a really interesting study, and I really was just trying new things with the plastic paper. And I highly recommend you guys get Yupo paper if you've never tried it. Super fun. I loved working on it. India ink and Yupo. Super cool. Okay, this is another series that I worked on vacation this summer. I went to Florida, and so I was in this beautiful bay where I could kind of paint all of the scenery. And the night one is actually a sketch that I did the day before, and then the next day I went back and painted in more detail on a canvas the dock in the daytime, and then the other piece was just on the island, and you can actually see our dock from it. So they all are the same thing, and that's why I felt comfortable including them in a series. The title is Florida Plein Air Series. I did them all outside. The one that's like water and a boat is gouache. The night scene is watercolor and gouache, and then the daytime one is just acrylic on canvas. The largest size is 8 by 10, and that's the acrylic one, and then the smallest is 5 by 5, and that's the night painting. During my vacation to Florida this summer, I took the opportunity to sketch unfamiliar landscapes and lighting scenes from life. In all 3 pieces, my goal was to show how shadow and light interact with the water's playful and unpredictable nature, and how to represent this with confident brushstrokes. The last 2 pages, which are the docks, one in day and one in night, done with no pencil sketches to practice painting directly onto the canvas from life. These are presented as one whole piece as my experience of the vacation's destination. So the next 2 images, I basically copy and pasted the same thing as the additional details, but kind of changed the wording a little bit, so I'm not gonna go into detail. The one's a male figure and one's a female figure. They're both charcoal on paper, and they're both 24 by 36 inches, and it's on toned newsprint. So it's at Edinburgh University, held an open nude figure drawing session where I was able to do studies of the human form. In this piece, I wanted to shift the composition to the right, and this is the male piece to show the heavy shadow casted by the figure, and also to work primarily on the torso and the arms of the figure to understand muscle anatomy. I worked with large 4-inch pieces of fine charcoal until the canvas was toned and the composition was sketched, and then used the eraser between transitions into smaller charcoal size. Fine details done in a fine point compressed charcoal pencils, and I did not include that I also used white Conte crayon. And the female figure is basically the same thing, but I wanted the strong light sat lower, and I wanted to get more of the entire setup, work on the cloth backdrop. I was studying more than the figures. The female piece, I included so much in it. There's structure in the back, there's the cloth, there's kind of those lines coming down where you can see tension points, and then I just have all these different textures. So that's kind of why I felt really intrigued to put this piece in, because I thought it showed something different than the other piece. If not, I would have just put one, but they also really like to see observational work, so I included this one. And I just made sure that when I was doing them, knowing they were for my portfolio, that I was putting a lot of time into not just the figure, but where they're sitting. The next piece is called The Cost of Happiness, and this is a piece that was not included in my National Portfolio Day portfolio, but this was the gap between my creative work and my observational studies, kind of my experimentation. This is the piece that they kind of recommended that I put in, and I'm not admission, so I can't say that this is necessarily a piece that they liked, but I feel like it tied into the next section of my portfolio, which is creative. It is gouache on paper, and it's 8 by 14 inches. It says Pennsylvania is one of the addiction capitals of the United States. I've grown up used to hearing about overdoses and cases of addiction to prescription medication on the local news. I decided to set up a still life not only because I wanted to learn about colored plastic and how to paint them in harsh lighting, but also to comment on the scary problem in our country. I changed labels to include demands given by medicine as though the viewer was being told what to do and not suggested to take them, similar to addiction. I added words around the composition so the viewer couldn't escape the reality of the epidemic going on around us. This ended up being a rewarding study of white materials and glowing orange shadows casted by the colored plastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed making this piece. So make your still lifes interesting as well. They don't have to be boring. They can tell a story, but like the colors were really fun to kind of spice up and make really interesting. So this is a sketchbook process that I included as one of my pieces in the entire portfolio. This was actually part of the RISD assignment, but I included it as part of my portfolio because I didn't have any room for the RISD assignment for this. The title was Sketchbook Process Ripple from Assignment. And then I used colored pencil and pen in Sketchbook, and it's 8 by 20 inches, kind of irrelevant. But I would recommend showing background on your RISD work. If you do it in a video, that's fine, but I didn't want to put mine in a video. So I thought just putting it as a portfolio piece, making sure they could see what my sketchbook work looked like. I'm not going to explain this too much. I basically told them that I just did this prior to my dive into the physical piece, the colors associating to the brain map, and then kind of my notes on what I was going to include in the piece, what I needed to research, and then kind of studying layouts and how I was going to make it work. It was a really complicated piece. It took me about a month, and I really was only allowing myself that much time because I knew it was for Parsons and for RISD. If it would have just been for RISD, I probably would have done something completely different. But I'll get more into the RISD challenge here in a minute because it's a complicated assignment. So my next is Synesthesia sketchbook study board for my RISD assignment. So I also included this, again, similar reasoning, but this is a collection of pieces. One's up here actually, but these are pieces I did over like about a year span where I was studying synesthesia and sound. Again, RISD assignment stuff, I'll get to it in a minute, but here's what how I formatted the slide. Okay, my next piece is titled Rhode. It's actually right here, and it's mixed media, plastic, mesh, spray paint, and acrylic, and it's on 8 by 10 inch canvas. This experimental piece is an attempt to capture the emotion of how it feels to smell rotting food or roadkill. I created a color palette based on my interpretation of the emotions of disgust I felt and tried to layer them in a grotesque abstract composition. I also wanted to dabble more into the realm of mixed media and how plastic and different types of paints interact. Again, I'm showing really experimental work kind of in the middle of my portfolio because though I still feel strongly that these show a lot of technical skill, I felt like they were really out there. So if I stuck them in the middle of my portfolio, they wouldn't stop looking because they knew from the beginning that there was really good potential for something good to happen at the end. So they keep looking through these pieces. But my next piece is called Send Sucked. Again, experimental. It's acrylic and Sharpie on canvas. It's 18 by 24 inches. And I said during a panic attack, I ran down to my art studio and in dim lighting began aggressively attacking a canvas with Sharpies and deep acrylic paints. I also applied large amounts of water onto the canvas and returned the next day to sign the dried piece. Though this piece of artwork was never meant to be successful, upon further inspection the following days, I saw it as it very well depicted my emotion during this time. I titled the work Send Sucked, which means it's a German word for yearning and longing, because that defined my need for the return of peace in my life. And my next work is titled Stratosphere. It's oil on canvas and it's 8 by 10 inches. I said a study of stylizing photo references of clouds. I layered wet on wet oil paint without a pencil sketch. I wanted to see if I could push the colors and shapes so far around a composition that they mimicked water and clouds so that the viewer couldn't decide which it was. My choice of title was to reveal the answer to the confusing nature of the experimental work. If you use photo reference, make sure there's a reason that it's not just easier to copy from a photo, or oh, I don't know why I used a photo. Oh, I thought this photo was cute. I liked the composition, because they're going to just be like, you're stealing the artwork, this is not original, which is kind of true, but if you're really stylizing and using photos as references, that is actually really beneficial for them to see. Okay, my next piece is called Neon Night. So now we're moving from my experimental work into my creative work that has more of a foundation and technical basis, but is still an actual like presentable piece. Again, this piece is titled Neon Night. It's watercolor and tinted gesso on cold pressed paper. It's 11 by 14 inches. I sketched a simple composition from my imagination and memory of places from an alley behind my house that I haven't viewed since my childhood into watercolor paper. I wanted to experiment with ways to paint the sensation similar to the vertigo that you feel when you look into the dark. Usually saw this in this alleyway at night. I used really expressive layers of intensely pigmented watercolor and the tinted white gesso with watercolor to add back in the saturated patterns that made the eye feel like the darkness is swirling in the piece. I also wanted to capture the saturated experience within shadow areas at night. Yeah, I had really fun with this piece. Have fun with your work. A lot of my work is from imagination, so I was showing showing them that and show them what you work on. So this is the only forest painting I included that is from my prom installation piece. So kind of I'm pulling different things from all my extracurriculars here. Like I have some work from my drawing class, I have some work from my painting, like etc. It's all working its way into my resume so that they're seeing the reflection of the things I'm doing being important. This is titled Forest Number 2. It's tempera, house paint, and acrylic on foam. It's 8 foot by 8 foot. My art mentor, Mrs. Hart, my teacher, love her, gave me 1 week to produce 4 of these 8 foot by 8 foot. That's the amount of time I did them in. Was I given more time? Yes. But the theme for the prom was Enchanted Garden. My prior knowledge of this landscape painting allowed me to complete these pieces with no references. So I basically just started with a toned canvas and then layered paint kind of the composition in. This was important for them to see where I'm at in my strongest without a reference. Like this is where you can see how I've learned a lot and I'm applying it to my creative project. Blah, blah, blah. Each of the paintings, you're hoping that you can like walk into them. Many students complimented my work for this, which was the goal of the installation. I attempted to make the gym walls drips of thin paint, vegetation, just rambling about why I did it and how I achieved the look. So this piece is really important. When I was at portfolio day, I had these split into photographs in a weird way that they thought was not beneficial to the work. They were confused as to how many masks there were. So I reformatted it into this. And as you can see up on the top, there is the 3 masks and then there's detail shots below. That made it more concise so that they understood that there were 3 masks. These below are detail shots. And basically I just threw a blanket on a table and pinned it to the wall and then took the photos next to a window. So like, don't think you need professional lighting, really basic stuff. The title is Skins. It's a ceramic piece with colored slips and glazes. It's high fire. I didn't want to ramble too much on. I didn't want to mess up because it's been a while since I took my dual enrollment course at Clarion. Again, reflecting my resume into my work. This is a piece from my ceramics class that I took as a dual enrollment on campus. It said, during my dual enrollment studio art course in ceramics at Clarion University, I learned a technique called bas relief that I used in a series of mask-like face sculptures. Our final was open to our imagination, so I wanted to create a piece that was half historical and half technical skills based similar to the structure of the class. We learned about clay's purpose and history as fertility bases, as decorative objects, structures, and architecture, and as general material for household dining uses and contemporary uses for function. I created these masks to embody the dyeing tradition of a heavily clay historic area in Africa that uses scarification of the skin to represent the same things clay does, and I made them functional, like they're masks, and that's kind of the functional use. So I'm talking about fertility. The scarring was based on fertility and like strength and things, similarly to what they were making these vases for to represent. So I was kind of showing the duality there. I love playing with the natural colors and juxtaposition of skin texture and the hardness of the material and making it look like an artifact so that it felt more cultural. My next piece, and one of my favorites, this piece literally took me an entire year. I've been working on it since the November before portfolio day, and I finished it for portfolio day, literally 2 days before portfolio day, and I knew it had to be my portfolio or I wasn't gonna go to portfolio day. It's titled Elders. It's oil on canvas and it's 4 by 5 feet. A reference pulled from my imagination and brainstorming into my sketchbook is what I used to create this large work. Originally, the composition included a figure reaching up, but was later removed and replaced with a leaning tree in the back that better captured the heart of the artwork. I drew on faces of my friends, strangers from Pinterest, and then layered long lines of paint to create a bark-like texture. My goal was to express how I have grown past and had light shown on my own struggles mentally, similar to how the viewer looks up at these trees that represent fear, anxiety, depression, and anger. Elders was chosen as the title not only because we respect our older family and friends because of age, but also because it represents the wisdom carried in the trees that are far older than many people on earth and the advice given by our social circles. So this is a really symbolic piece. Most of my work ended up being about mental illness and kind of overcoming struggles and social issues. So my next piece, and actually the star of my portfolio, it's called Growth. It's a mixed media work. It's approximately 3.5 by 2.75 feet. I really didn't know what to say here because it's really not a square. I put the medium because not all of my things that I used for this would fit in the media box, so up in the top of my additional details I put drift/scrap wood, spray paint, single-use plastic, live plants, it was intense, a collage, acrylic, puffy paint, and dried flowers, and then in parentheses, the driftwood was collected and sterilized in Florida. It says a romanticized commentary on the hopelessness of climate change, nature versus man, and life versus death. I attempted to create an ever-changing piece of artwork through the medium of live plants. If the caretaker of the work waters the plants, they grow over the dark, tragic landscape of the work, or die if neglected. The symbolism is paralleled to that of humans' position in recovering the damage done currently on Earth due to climate change. The title was derived from two definitions of the word growth: an increase of size or a large growing attachment to an original thing to describe the balance in the piece. I photographed the piece to cast a shadow on the wall to symbolize looming presence of our future. And they really liked that this was more installation versus a piece. That's something I didn't have in my portfolio. The fact that it has a caretaker, that it can change forever, it can fill a room with vines, that was really interesting to them. This work is called Pieces of Me. It's mixed media on an extra large button-up shirt, and then size, I just said extra large men's button-up. I don't know how big it is. I didn't measure it. I began by bleaching portions of a worn-out button-up and layering paint, sewn hand-dyed textiles, buttons, yarn, ink, and dye to mimic a photo a friend asked me to recreate that she took this summer in Europe. This piece is about how people become a collection of their experiences and wear them around as a weight, positive and negative, similar to how we show our personality through clothing. I wanted to show a deteriorating garment to allude to my own fading childhood memories and my battle to sew them back into place, similar to the pieces of fabric attached to the back. I also wanted to place my model within flags to express how our personalities and action result in physical change and parallels in our surrounding environments and social connection. She is tangled in the last image to show how this isn't always a positive physical outcome of our experiences and memories. My next piece is Blemish. It's a self-portrait. It's oil pastel and acrylic on hand-stretched canvas. It's 20 by 24 inches, and it says, "In my final work, I wanted to express my collection of experiences and my own perspective on the world as color and shape. The view, seeing me glance back at the surrounding environment, has polarized me from my surrounding peers, but also related them to me because I am so outspoken about my internal process. Here, I'm presented as a complex collection of shapes to show I've gathered bits and pieces of the world around me and want the viewer to look over my shoulder as I do to see the world in my eyes. My face is painted in oil pastels, and the background is acrylic paint with oil pastel texture over it. I painted the hair to have the motion of me turning my head done from observation, a mirror in front of me as I worked." Again, I ended with an observational piece, but I thought a self-portrait kind of summarized who I was because all of my work was about me. Some people start a portfolio with a self-portrait, some don't have one at all, so don't feel like that's a model. So overall, before I get into kind of my RISD assignment / Parsons challenge, I started my portfolio with 2 strong paintings, and then kind of those progressed to the California painting, those into more observational works, my studies, my observational work out into my creative work with the pills piece, my sketchbook exploration, more experimentation with the piece, Rhode right here, and then my anxiety piece, Stratosphere being the cloud painting, and then Stratosphere is leaning into, if I were to present in a gallery right now, this is the work that I feel represents me, the forest painting, my skin's final, and then I ended it with something about me because all of my work really reflects who I am. So basically that is the portfolio I submitted for all schools. For Parsons, basically just remove the first chunk of my work. If it's the first 2 pieces and then just my creative work, that's basically what I submitted. So I'm gonna finish kind of this whole video on my RISD assignment. My first response is works of synesthesia. I'll place the photo here. These are what was derived from this stuff, when that picture with all of those in the sketchbook. This piece was derived from that, and basically they didn't let you say a whole lot about the piece. You just shove it in and they just look at it. So that's what I included. They didn't have anything to write about, so that's kind of why I included something in my portfolio, was making sure that I could still describe the pieces as they went so they understood why I did these. So if you don't have the option next year, I don't know what the challenge is. This was the current challenge when I did it, but try to do something like that because I feel like it helped. And then my last response was titled Ripple. This is the photo. I'm not going to go into too much detail about them. This piece is basically really hard to construct. It has lighting, it's plastic, it's a sculpture, but it hangs similar to how the plant piece did. I wanted to make sure I showed like the development of that, the modernization of that kind of, but I chose my natural phenomenon to be sound because I thought that was an interesting thing that I was sure not a lot of people could kind of cite, like using the senses. I actually have synesthesia, so I can kind of visualize music. So basically during the whole process of making my RISD challenge, I was listening to different music for the first entry, and the second one while I was making it, it was basing those textures I created for music into, while I was listening to like a background track of the Amazon rainforest, I was like constructing it. So again, duality, juxtaposition between like nature versus like modern music, if that makes sense. Finally, I'm going to talk about my scholarships. So I did get accepted to every single school. Pratt and Parsons gave me a 50% tuition ride, which was $27,000 for Pratt and $22,000-ish for Parsons. RISD gave me a larger scholarship, and it was $44,000 a year, and I'm not sure what percentage that comes out to, but I am attending RISD in the fall of 2020. Super exciting. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave some comments below. Give the video a like, subscribe, and I'm planning on probably doing some stuff about RISD when I get there. So I hope I can be a portfolio video that kind of helped you guys as well. So it's currently March 19th during the COVID-19 epidemic. So stay safe, everybody, and good luck on your college applications this summer. I hope everything goes well. I hope you make some really awesome artwork, and I can't wait to meet some of you that also applied the same time as me and are watching this as now accepted RISD members, or good luck at your schools in the fall. So yeah, everybody, see ya.